Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of the Vampire Diaries, as well as the latest episode of Van Helsing. Starting off with the Vampire Diaries, we learn a little bit more about the Siren. Her name is Sybil, if I remember correctly. So it was kind of interesting where we got at the beginning of the episode where they were going after, like, basically Damon bought her a new victim. And this, how she went about was very interesting, because initially she wanted to kind of keep him calm because she read watched some videos or read stuff online about, like, you know, how the fact is that when basically people are scared, basically it floods the entire body with adrenaline. And she kind of was like, in her mind, she's like, oh, that taints the food or whatever. But then Damon kind of tells her, like, well, every person we brought to you was in full-on fear mode, so adrenaline had to be pumping throughout their body. She's like, oh, really? And she's like, oh, they were all delicious. And she's like, never mind. She snaps the guy out of it because the entire time she's trying to drown him and everything, right? So snaps it out of it, and just, like, it's like, we didn't really see her eat him. We just saw her drowning him. But I guess, you know, I mean, she did talk about the flesh and everything, so she most likely did eat him afterwards. But it's like, because the question comes up again, because I brought that up last episode too. It's like, why specifically Damon and Enzo? Like, she could have literally eaten him because they've gotten a lot of bad stuff. They've done a lot of stuff because she's after evil people. It's like, you know, you got two of the baddest people. I mean, vampires end up doing a lot of bad stuff in their life. Damon's killed a lot of people, which kind of pops up, you know, kind of plays a part in this episode, but I get to that eventually. But the fact is, why not them? Like, I brought it up last episode being like, maybe it's just she can't, either she doesn't have a taste for the supernatural or she can't eat them. Like, one of the two, or maybe it's just a special reason. Because it's like, the fact of the matter is, it's understandable, like, why she get Damon and Enzo. Is kind of the question of, like, why she chose them. Is like, well, that, you know, Enzo's kind of like, well, the fact is we were there first, so that's why. But it's like, subsequently, even if it was outside the fact of, like, hey, you know, she wasn't at her full power, she wasn't in her body, so she couldn't really do anything at that point. So it was hard to kind of fit, you know, get people out. But she is yet to add anyone else to the group. It's only still containing Damon and Enzo, so no one else has been added to the roster. Yet she's had multiple opportunities to get Stefan, but she didn't. She stopped Stefan, but she didn't join him. So it's like something specifically about Damon and Enzo. Maybe whatever the hell it is she's planning, she needs evil people, like, in both regards, to both. Maybe she needs, like, you know, out of anything, like, the best way I can think of it is, like, she needs evil souls that are trying to redeem themselves. Like, because Enzo and Damon are two examples of people who had a very evil soul that they've kind of, like, they've done a lot of evil things, but they've tried to change things around because they've fallen in love and everything. Stefan isn't the right example, because that's the only reason why I can think that she wouldn't take Stefan out of anybody. Because Stefan's been the most apologetic about what he's done in the past. He's always regretted it. Because anytime he's kind of been in his Ripper mode, he just kind of, like, laments about it. And he constantly lives with what he's done in the past. Which Damon has done before. But it's like, for Damon, it's more so like, the past is the past. I can't change it. There's some things he regrets. But overall, it's like, he was almost content with his past. He accepted it. It's like, well, that's who I was then. That's still kind of who I am now, but I'm not letting it, you know, he's not letting it weigh him down like Stefan did. And I kind of feel like Enzo's kind of along that same line. So I can only assume that's one reason why she doesn't want Stefan, because he's kind of, in a sense, cleansed his soul, but not necessarily Enzo or Damon. That's the only reason I can explain, because it's like, things would be a lot easier for you if you took someone else, but it's like, you had two opportunities to get Stefan, because she even went as far last episode saying, like, oh, like, because Damon was like, she said you can go. She's like, your time isn't, like, saying something along the lines of, like, your time isn't now. So meaning, like, she might come after him eventually, but maybe there's just not enough darkness in his heart to kind of, you know, he's done some dark things, but like I said, apologetic. He's kind of turned his life around in certain regards, so it's like he's not as bad as he could be. Maybe if he reverted back to his Ripper self, then she'd take an interest in him, but it seems like she needs people with a very dark heart that's trying to change but haven't quite done it yet. I don't know. Like, that's the only thing I can chalk that up to. I mean, it's really sad in this episode. Well, for one, the fact is that she goes after Sarah, which I'd like, until the episode reminded me, I'd completely forgot the fact is Damon still didn't know anything about her existence until Stefan told him. I was like, all right, right. Damon never found out. Like Enzo ended up finding out and was trying to use that against Stefan. Last season or season 6, I don't remember. Quick side note. I can't remember if I brought this up last episode or not, but like, it does make you wonder where everyone, like, will we ever see like Matt come back or Jeremy? Because Jeremy, like, he didn't pop up at all last season. I mean, who knows? Maybe the actor decided to kind of back away from the show after everything was said and done. And, I think the last time we saw him was in season 6 saying goodbye to Elena. That was the last time. So, I mean, because he is a hunter, because he ended up getting the hunter's mark, but I guess, like, I don't know, maybe the actor decided not to come back to the show. Maybe he's just kind of busy with other projects at the time, whatever the case may be. Maybe we're going to get him back in this season. I don't know. Because that's the thing. You don't always get those opportunities where you have everyone from the cast coming back for the final season. I mean, who knows if we'll even get Nina Dobrev back for the series finale, or just like at any point during this final season. Like, maybe we will, maybe we won't. I guess it really just depends on everything. We kind of see where the story progresses. And because it is the final season, so I'm already trying to click it out in my brain. Like, it's one of those series that you feel like maybe there might be a happy ending. You hope there's a happy ending. Part of my brain is literally going down like either Stefan or Damon is going to die. My money's on Damon. Like, Damon sacrifices himself. It's like, something to make sure that Stefan gets to live, or maybe Stefan sacrifices himself for Damon, or maybe hopefully you kind of want like, oh, everyone gets a happy ending, but it's like, it's one of those shows that I feel like it literally could go either way. Like, I feel like not everyone's going to survive this series. Like, that's this final season, I don't think everyone's going to survive, but that's just my opinion. But the whole Sarah situation, we ended up finding out some interesting thing. Ever since she found out about basically her family connection, finding out who Damon and Stefan was she stopped using the trust fund that they put up for her, which was kind of a very interesting thing. Like, I mean, the only reason why Sarah was kind of thrown out there anyway is because Sybil was trying to get inside of Enzo's head, but she couldn't. He was so good at blocking her out, but she kept being suspicious of him and everything, and she kept diving deeper, and she finally kind of cracked through, but a name came up, and that was Sarah's. I mean, he ends up explaining it later. The fact is, he gave her Sarah because he didn't want her to have Bonnie, which is kind of sad. That's why he was trying so hard to kind of get to her and save her. Sadly, that didn't work out because she ended up killing. I was like, oh God, Damon's about to kill her. But it's like, nope. I was like, oh, she got away. I was like, oh, something's going to go wrong. And bam, you see her at the front door. She stabs him, and when stabs Sarah, and then just when Stefan's trying to give her some blood, she stops him. And it's like, oh crap. And hence why I was saying, like, she had an opportunity to take him, but she didn't. So there's more to it than that. But the saddest thing is, she ended up taking that one safe space away from Damon. It was the only thing keeping him from being under her control completely. That one memory of when him and Elena first met, the memory he originally took from her, because he's like, oh, I can't have anyone knowing I'm back in Mystic Falls just yet. So that particular memory, that meeting, it started everything. And you kind of forget, like, this showed you just how significant that one moment was when she got inside of Damon's head, because she was like, oh, who's Elena? It's like, why am I just hearing this name for the first time? And then kind of goes into his head. And it's really sad because it's like, apparently that one memory, that little tiny memory that he was holding on to, was the keystone. It was the foundation, hiding all the other memories tied to her. Every experience, everything that's connected to Elena, the love he had for her, all was hidden beneath that memory. So the moment she interfered with that, she ended up interfering, kind of getting a peek at all his other memories. And to make things more interesting, it's like, oh, I can use this to my advantage, rather than kind of wiping it from his memory, which we don't know for sure she has that kind of power or not. What she does is she kind of replaces Elena, the emotional connection. So probably in all those memories he has, we only saw in that particular memory when they first met, she introduced herself and took over Elena's spot in his mind. So whether I can only assume it's like that for all other memories. She's corrupted him, and now Damon's completely hers. And Stefan's just kind of like, my brother is stronger than that. And it's like, no, he's not. You're kind of giving him too much credit. But it's like, I like to think Stefan is right that hopefully Damon can break through it. But right now, it seems like he can't. And just sadly, Sarah died. Like, Sarah was literally the last remnant of the, like, Salvatore family. because now the only person left is Damon, but even Damon's not Damon anymore. And it's like, he's in his head, like Stefan's in his head, like, I lost, I'm alone again. And she, like, Caroline tries to tell him, it's like, no, you're not. Your brother's still alive, but he's kind of in that mentality of just like, I've lost him because she has him now. She's completely in his head. And it's just sad. It's like, he fought so hard. He turned off his emotions and everything because he went into that, turned off his humanity for the purpose of making her think like he's 100% on her side. Like, he was okay with the killing and everything, but it was the only way he could handle it. Because Damon, deep down, with all his flaws and everything, he's actually a good guy. He makes a lot of mistakes, yes, but deep down, he is a good guy that on occasion, he does try to do the right thing, especially after, everything that's happened to him over the course of this entire series, especially being with Elena. It changed him and made him want to be a better person, which, like I said, doesn't always work out because he's flawed, but like, who's not flawed? But it's just like all that's been taken away from him. So now he's completely under control. Because in the episode, he tried convincing Enzo to kind of like, hey, you should cut off your humanity too. Have fun with me. I think that was his way of kind of telling Enzo, you'd be a lot better off if you kind of block your memory. That kind of spiraled, that kind of all didn't work out when Bonnie showed up with Caroline and Stefan, and he wouldn't even look her in the eye. He's telling her, explaining to her, it's like, I can't be with you. I can't come back yet. I got to stop her. I don't know what her plan is. I don't know what she's doing, why she just wants us, like what her ultimate goal is and everything. And she's like, no, you can just fight her. You can come back. He's like, I can't. She has control of me. I am doing everything I possibly can to keep you out of my mind so she doesn't know that you're important. Because if she knows you're important to me, she can hurt you. She can take you away from me. Because I guess, granted, maybe when Sybil went through Damon's mind, she found out about Elena's situation. So it's kind of like, well, she doesn't have to worry about going out of her way to kill Elena to kind of remove that last piece of Damon's heart that's left that's not completely hers. Or maybe she felt like this situation was a lot more effective because it's like, this way you completely take over his mind. Because if you kill Elena, there's still that part of her memory inside of his head that would keep him from being, like, she's got him under control by like 99%, but there's that 1% just of Elena kind of holding him back, keeping his humanity in check. That's why he ended up letting Sarah go, but sadly it didn't work out that case. But what I really like is the fact is that Bonnie kind of went into selfish mode this episode, where she basically tried to kidnap Enzo. She was like, screw it. No, I've had enough of this. I've been worried about you. I love you. I am not letting you go. And she's driving off with him. I was like, holy crap, leaving everybody behind to do this. But it sadly doesn't work out because Enzo ends up kind of like getting a headache and he starts bleeding from his nose. Apparently, their psychic link, their mind connected, means he can't be too far away from her. In my mind, it's a reference I'm sure not a lot of people might get, but it's kind of like Beelzebub, how Baby Belle can't be that far away from Olga because it's like there's like a 15 meter, something like that. Maybe it's 15 feet, I don't remember, like distance as far as they can go. If they go any further, basically Baby Belle kind of shocks Olga, and like the further they're apart, the stronger the electricity gets to the point it kills them. I know I'm going all weeb mode and talking about anime and stuff, but nevertheless, it's kind of similar to that. That's kind of just where my brain went naturally, just because it's kind of the one thing I can pull from to kind of reference in comparison to it. So he's like, I told you I can't go. He's like, the only thing you can do is forget about me. He says that, but immediately kisses Bonnie after because he loves her, and it's just like, no matter how much he fights it, he wants to be with her. Which, after everything, like, okay, Enzo will be okay. And she's like, well, Enzo, I had to let Enzo go because I couldn't break the spell. And then Caroline's like, you what? Oh, so basically everything was for nothing. Sarah ended up dying. Like, she's like, well, this is before she knew Sarah had died, but it's like, you should have been here to help us. We could have helped you. But Bonnie says something that's so heartbreaking. She's like, I see you and Steph and you're so happy. She's like, are you mad at us for being happy? She's like, no, I'm happy for you being happy, but you being happy kills me on the inside because me and Enzo should be having that. We should be together. Like, everything was resolved, the whole armory situation. And, Damon sacrificed himself, went in there, got caught up in this whole Siren thing. And then Enzo went after him, trying to bring him back. And it's just, I lost the man I love. And it's not fair. Like, I'm not hating on you and Stefan, but, in a sense, she's jealous. And it's like, it breaks her heart that she can't be with the man she loves. Because basically them having each other makes her feel all alone. Because when you break it down, Bonnie's kind of is alone, and it kind of clicks into Caroline. It's like, oh, I've been so focused in my own stuff that I haven't realized just how alone you are. Because for one, she doesn't have Enzo. She doesn't have Damon. She doesn't have Elena. She doesn't have Jeremy. She doesn't have Matt. And she barely has Caroline because Caroline's dealing with her family. She's dealing with Stefan. And it's just like, she's like, almost like, I've been so focused on my own stuff, I haven't realized the fact is how you were feeling, you know, being there for you, not realizing how much this was affecting you. Because it's just like, for her, she's like, the way she's feeling now, she would rather die than keep feeling the way she feels. She wants to die because it makes her feel like that. And it's something I never even thought about, because like with Caroline and Stefan being so focused on each other, being there for each other, it's like she has no one. All her friends and all the other people that she cares about are gone. You know, only person she had left, it's, you know, yes, she's, you know, she has Stefan to a certain extent, but the only like real friend she has left is Caroline, like, you know, because her besties, both Damon as well as Elena aren't there. So that's very heartbreaking. And you had that moment later on in the episode where she finally gets into Enzo's brain. From what we see, it doesn't seem like she does the same thing to Enzo that she did to Damon, kind of implanting herself in that memory. It's like, oh, so this is what you've been hiding from me this entire time, seeing Bonnie, which is kind of like, ugh. I mean, speaking of Bonnie, it's like, well, what could Bonnie have really done? Because apparently she isn't a witch. Her powers never came back. So, I mean, I don't know if that's something that she's eventually going to have to, you know, be able to, you know, have to get back or what. But it's like, as a human, it's not very much she could have done. But I guess in that regard, it's like if Bonnie was there, she could have helped out with the whole Caroline situation, got Caroline's ring back earlier, then they could have both went off to help with the Siren. That is the question, though, too. Like, does her power work on women? That hasn't come up yet. I mean, that we definitely, well, no, it doesn't, because we haven't really seen if it works on women or not, because it's like the one woman that we've had experience with, like, she was dealt with before, like her boyfriend was brought to Sybil, but the girlfriend was killed and, you know, used as a clue by Enzo. So I don't know, Maybe it does. We just haven't seen it yet. I mean, from my knowledge, it's like sirens specifically have always been like, oh, and you know, when you look at myths and stuff like that, when it comes to them, it's always sailors. It's never really explained whether it works on females. Some stuff that kind of, you know, anything I've watched in the past, I can't bring up anything specific, but I feel like there are times when it's kind of like, oh, sirens kind of like spells don't work on females because it's like their brain is not wired to work like that. And because I'm bringing this all up, there's also the question of, I think I brought this up last episode too, like, what about Valerie? I mean, a witch vampire, maybe she has, you know, being a heretic and whatnot, maybe she's been around long enough to really know about something like this. I mean, because it's like, who do you ask questions about like this? Only person I can think of is possibly the originals. I mean, would even the Michelsons even know anything about this? I mean, granted, they got their own issues to deal with, you know, especially where we see Klaus is left at, as well as the rest of the family. So it's kind of like in the state they're in, it's like not like they can help anybody. Plus, like, side note, we don't really know where the originals kind of lines up with, you know, the Vampire Diaries. Because remember, this, like, season 7 had this series kind of, you know, this present day series is taking place like 3 years into the future, whereas the original storyline last season was tied into that, like, you know, prior to that 3-year time skip. So, I mean, that's kind of also the thing, like, with this, the 4th season coming up, which is possibly going to be the final season too. I've read some stuff here and there talking about it being possibly being picked up by Netflix, so it might continue in the future, but for now, this coming 4th season will be its final season as well, which kind of makes sense since you're ending one show. But, you know, that happens sometimes where it's like, well, some shows outlive their other predecessors. You know, sometimes, some occasions, like, you know, the spin-off kind of keeps going even when the original ends, or maybe you know, that's I'm not trying to not going down that rabbit hole, but nevertheless, so I guess they would just have to be specific about, I mean, because really it'd be kind of spoilers for the 4th season. It really depends on how they decide to approach that, whether we make it so that there's been a 3-year period of the whole situation with Klaus, that the whole Marcel situation where Marcel kind of puts that dagger inside of him, and he's kind of tortured and left in his own mind and kind of suffer like that. So whether, like, we kind of pick up the story 3 years later or not to kind of keep the timelines on the same place, or whether they kind of it all happens during that 3-year period, I don't know. But I feel like the Michelsons would be kind of the only source, especially, God, I can't even think of Freya. I was like tripping, like the one sister that is a witch, so she'd have maybe some idea about what this whole Siren situation is, because we learned a little bit more about Georgie's character, because we see that she is, as I'm glad to see that they're keeping Allison around. I was like, just because she's too specific, I was like, okay, she's going to have a part to play in this. I don't know what, but she's going to have some part to play. So, I mean, which I'm glad. I'm just like, I'm glad to see her in anything. I just get, it's like, And like, interestingly enough, I brought up like, her as Claudia from Warehouse 13, because that's like one of the biggest roles I've seen her in. I mean, she was also one of the Wonder Twins in Smallville, whether you realize it or not. But actually, the first thing I think I ever saw her in was in Drake and Josh. She was the girl Megan that her and Josh kind of always competed, just because like who's smarter and whatnot. And I think eventually at one point in the series, her and Josh started dating, just because it was kind of like they put everything aside. So that was actually the first thing I ever seen her in. I know I'm going off book here. I'm kind of just going on a tangent, but that was just, I don't know, I'm super excited anytime I get to see her. I'm just like, Allison. And notice I haven't been calling her by her last name, because I attempted it last time and I'm sure I got it right. So it's, nevertheless, I'm saying I'm sure I got it right. I doubt I did, but nevertheless, it's like when I say Allison, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. But nevertheless, Georgie. We find out a little bit more about Georgie. She sees the symbol, because she's kind of picking up on Alaric's thing, because it's like, yo, I know you're lying. This whole like, oh, you think there was a siren back here? She's trying to like get him to kind of admit some stuff. It's like, I know there's a lot more to this than that. And then she sees a symbol in the book and it kind of freaks her out. She ends up telling Alaric about a story of basically how when she got super drunk and was basically in a car accident that her best friend died in. And that she basically went to hell, because basically it was kind of a plane of existence where she kind of had to live, kind of relish in the fact is that she had killed her best friend and that she was all alone. And that when she died, she saw that symbol, the symbol that she apparently has like a tattoo of now. And then afterwards, like the paramedics were able to resuscitate her, kind of restart her heart. She was apparently dead for a minute. Which kind of gets Alaric thinking, like, okay, maybe she's kind of a piece to this entire Siren puzzle. Because you also find, like, that basically the Siren kind of got shipped to where she was kind of held back in like 1792 or something like that. Along with her ended up being something else. It looked, that thing, I refer to it as kind of a staff looking thing. Apparently has the same symbol too, and it came up with the Siren symbol, so it's kind of like what that's all about, because we still don't know what she's all about, what it is that she wants, what she's aiming for. Why specifically, like, is it because she feeds off of evil souls, or is there a specific reason why she's gathering evil souls? Once again, bringing up the question, why Damon and Enzo? Like I said, this is only the second episode, so maybe she'll add more people in the future. We'll kind of have to see where that goes. But for right now, she's had her body. She's kind of getting used to kind of modern society. So it's like, why not pick more people? Why just them? It has to be not unless she's like trying to cast some huge spell for whatever purpose. I mean, because apparently she is a siren, and they brought it up last episode, are kind of like messengers of the devil, kind of hell. So I don't know, like, because that was something Damon brought up last episode. It kind of got brought up this episode. The fact is that, like, hey, hell, because that's something Damon actually kind of fears, is just kind of like basically the price to pay for everything that they've ever done. And, Stefan being hopeful is kind of like, no, you can come back from this. I mean, the fact is that he didn't kill Sarah was kind of like a good sign, but it's like now that Sybil has complete control of him, it's like, who's to say? Like, and who's to say she doesn't have complete control of Enzo now? So it's just, there's so much. I mean, also I'm curious about the nanny. Her name is Celine. Whether she's going to play a role in this or not, like, I feel like she's going to be more than just kind of like a possible love interest for Alaric. Because at first it seemed like there might be something between him and Georgie, but like Alaric kind of shut that down quick. But now there may be something between him and the nannies. I don't know. Because it seems like, because remember when it was all said and done, because they haven't brought that up again. I mean, granted, they're keeping the girls safe and everything, but Virginia tried to kill them last episode, so maybe they're a key to all this, like I said, because they are special. They are from the Gemini coven, plus the fact is they were technically born from a vampire, so it makes them extra super special. And they also are heretics, so, because remember they were siphoning, I think I brought that up last episode, but they siphoned some of Caroline's powers as a vampire, which was kind of causing a problem and everything. So they're, maybe that's specifically why, because other than them, I think Valerie is the only surviving heretic, because everyone else is dead. So, I guess a kind of a good note to kind of end this off on. I mean, it's not completely all screwed up. We do have Stefan kind of proposing to Caroline, which is great, which is beautiful. Does kind of put a damper on it when you think it's like, oh, but isn't that a little word? I was kind of halfway expecting Caroline to be like, no, we can't get married. Not yet, until this whole thing is resolved, because it's like, Bonnie's still super depressed because she's all alone. It's like, oh, you're over there getting super happy and everything. Because even Bonnie kind of brought it up. She's like, oh, I'm gonna grow old with Enzo. I guess the whole point is to kind of like grow old with him in the extent of like, oh, she'll get older and everything, which will be a problem. But at the same time, at least she'll be with him. That's just kind of the mentality I have. Because the last of the Cure, because they made because the whole like being trapped in a, old period of time back in season 6. I mean, at the end of season 5, but most of season 6, they were trapped in, what was it, 1992 or 94. So basically, the Cure still existed, so they were able to bring that back. But obviously, like, that no longer exists, so there's no Cure of like ever making them human again. That we know of. I mean, series could do a crazy thing where it's like, and you're all cured and you're no longer vampires, you get to live the rest of your life as humans, which, I mean, who knows, that might have ramifications of like, oh, we're human again. I was like, oh crap, we're back to dying from the thing that originally killed us. Which was kind of the whole thing, like when they crossed the border, like that the travelers had put up the barrier around Mystic Fall, that basically once the magic depleted, they ended up reverting back into the forms that, they ended up re-dying the same way that they died. Like, for instance, it's like Stefan and Damon ended up getting shot, right? I think, like, let's use a better example that I'm 100% clear on, was like Tyler. Tyler ended up getting his neck snapped because that's how he got turned into a hybrid, which, kind of speaking of Tyler, because I was literally thinking about it, it's like, last time, I can't remember where it lined up, but the last time we saw him was either when, I'm pretty sure it was after, like, he got, he was being held by the armory and got away. That, and also how the last time we kind of saw him before that was kind of like how he was taking Elena away. I can't remember if those were, like, at what points. I'm pretty sure the whole, like, him taking Elena away was the most recent point in the time period, if I remember. Maybe it wasn't. I don't remember. So either way, it was either when he was running away because he was kind of losing himself to his wolf thing, and like Damon was kind of worried about Bonnie, which I'm pretty sure that was pre-time skip. So I'm thinking it was kind of the whole like taking Elena's body weight. So that was kind of the last time we saw him. And also about the St. John's, specifically, of the Enzo's family. I wonder will they play a role in this season. I mean, to our knowledge, the last of them died with technically Virginia, so it's like maybe there's more to them than that, because there's just so much that's kind of like, I don't know, this show's always had a big mystery element to it. I mean, every season does technically. It's because like, trying to figure out what's going on around here. So I don't know, it seems like it's even bigger in this one. Like I said, we're pretty early on in the season. It's literally only the second episode of 16, so there's a lot more directions this could take, a lot more stuff to kind of get revealed as the season progresses. So I'm enjoying it so far. Like I said, you kind of get that feeling of just like, it's sad when every time you look at it, it's just final season written all over it. It's just a little depressing, but exciting at the same time. So, and now moving on to this week's episode of Van Helsing. So a lot of interesting things. We ended up kind of finding out what happened to the group that got kicked out last episode. Most, if not all of them, are dead. We saw Muhammad kind of hiding nearby when at least the main girl, the one that was kind of started the whole situation, the one that kind of attacked them, was like, oh, this is your fault that, the little girl could have almost died or whatever. It seemed like it was her, and it was like she's bleeding. She's like, I can't be saved, kind of informing Muhammad about the whole situation. And so kind of, I love how Muhammad ended up being kind of the one that kind of helped save the day, but they didn't really know about it. But I'll get to that in a second. But we get introduced to Dimitri's death squad, which, I mean, we also found out in this episode Dimitri's first learning about Julius's betrayal, that the fact is Julius had Vanessa and that he was going to use her. He learned all this from the messenger. He's like, you tell Julius this. He's like, you know what? Never mind. I'll tell him myself. The guy's about to walk away. Dimitri grabs his head, starts squeezing, and made his head pop. And I was like, ugh. Especially because he got it all over that doctor dude's food. And he's like, eat. And you can hear the doctor kind of trying to choke down the food with the guy's brains all over. And it's like, that's messed up. At the very least, let him kind of wipe away all the brains and flesh and skull matter that most likely fell on his food. Which we kind of got an interesting conversation from him. Apparently, him and Rebecca are working on some kind of serum. Like, I don't think that's come up before. Maybe it has, and I just missed it. What the serum's about, I don't know. Know that they're testing it on children just because children are kind of developing. I guess their body system works a little bit better than that of an adult or whatever. I don't know. Maybe trying to replicate the vampirism so it's a lot easier to turn people. Maybe it's kind of working on a serum that kind of helps them block out the sun, because slowly, eventually they know the sun will come back again, but they're not taking any chances. They're not about to return to the shadows like they were supposed to. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know what the serum's for. I mean, I guess like that's still an element. Like Dimitri and his side of things is something we still only get little peeks at here and there. Nothing like we really dive into. We had Julius attacking the compound, which everyone kind of did a pretty bang up job. Like first with the UV lights outside. I love the fact is that his vampires were willing to sacrifice themselves for him, like smashing them and everything. Going up the stairs, like, you know, kind of being blown up to a certain degree. I even like some of the stuff they were making explode and they were pushing it down. Like one was like a desk or something, spikes, ended up going down the escalators and stabbing one of the vampires. That was pretty impressive. But it was really interesting when you ended up seeing Julius kind of back down when he saw the death squad approaching, Dimitri's death squad, and he's just kind of like, oh, we run to kind of die another day. And it's like, wow. Like, he acts so tough. Because like I'm saying, like I brought it up last episode, or rather the episode before last, he sent his men down there to deal with the sewers. It's like they told him about, oh, they're a little terrified of the whole sewer situation. And it's like, he sit other people down, yet he didn't go himself. And he kind of did this episode too. It's like, you infiltrate, I'll stand out here and kind of bark out orders. It's like, you know, I mean, because even Flesh kind of brought it up, being like, the fact is that Julius will kill he will sacrifice as many people as he wants to, because he doesn't care about people. He just cares about himself, which I'll get to, Flesh in a second. But the fact is, to see him kind of back down like that, it's like Julius acts like he's top dog, which he kind of instills fear into people. But it's like, when you look at him like that, you're kind of like, you're a punk. Like, you're afraid of Dimitri. You're afraid of his goons, his death squad. It's like, you're like, oh, we'll back down another day. It's like they outnumber us and everything. He acts like such a tough guy, but when the going gets tough, he backs down. I mean, literally, he was so like, oh, what about Vanessa? It's like, the guy was like, oh, there's no way her and Susan could have survived. And he kind of had a little fit and everything. But it's like, if you really didn't believe that, you should have gone out on yourself. But you didn't, because you're a chicken. Like, stop acting like such a tough guy. I mean, I'm saying this, you know, because it's like, I mean, truth be told, is when the going gets tough, I guess he could. I mean, we really haven't seen Julius really in action. We've seen him kind of choke people out. It's like, how dare you, like, kind of talk to me or behave in this way. Is like, I am top dog around here. I run things. I tell you to do something, you do it, you know. But it's like, he's still kind of at a disadvantage to Dimitri. It's like, it seems like more people, I feel, you know, because the whole thing is he's talking about how Dimitri's kind of lost his edge. I mean, that's the whole reason why he wants Vanessa. I mean, granted, we still don't know why Dimitri wants Vanessa, like what the whole purpose of that is, but we know that he's like, you know, that's why Julius wants Vanessa, because he, you know, whole power play against Dimitri. But a very interesting thing, getting back to Flesh, an interesting thing we learned about was like, oh, we knew he was kind of part of Julius's crew or whatever, just a vampire in general. What we didn't know is that he is a lieutenant. He was a top ranking. That's what Susan was kind of tripping about. Like, oh, you don't know who this guy is? And she brings it up in this episode. He was kind of top dog when it came to Julius's crew. So he knows Julius very well. He knows about Dimitri and Rebecca too. And he kind of forms the rest of the group that basically they're ancients. I don't know whether necessarily Julius is an ancient. Definitely Dimitri and Rebecca are, but I'd assume Julius is one too. I'm sure he's not nearly as old as Dimitri. I feel like out of anyone, it's probably like age-wise, it's probably Dimitri, Rebecca, and then Julius. Maybe they could have all been from around the same time. They're ancient vampires. It makes you wonder where, like, they're the firstborn vampires. How does vampirism work in that regard? Like, if you're an ancient, is it that, like, oh, vampirism passes down like a genetic thing? And it's like, oh, their parents were vampires, so they became vampires? Or is it like something happened, maybe like something, you know, they made a deal with some kind of evil to become the original vampires or something like that? I don't know. That's just where I'm kind of chalking out to. But he kind of explains that to everyone. You know, which kind of puts John in a sour mood because John's like, screw you. I know that you're still a part of this. The fact of the matter is, you know all this information and I just know it's going to come back. You basically, that John's like, yo, you're going to screw us over. Which, I love that thing later on when Vanessa is like, okay, if you're going to shoot him, John, do it. Stop talking and just do some action. If you really don't trust him, then shoot him. And then, like, Flesh kind of put his head against, he walked closer to John and actually placed his forehead against the barrel. Because truth be told is, Flesh is fine with dying. If it means dying, it kind of does him a favor because I don't think he wants to go back to being a vampire, but I think deep down he resents himself because of everything that he did as a vampire. It disgusts him. He has nightmares about it. He has trouble sleeping because of it, but also because of what he did to his own family. He can't forgive himself for that. So if it means dying, he's like, go ahead and kill me if it needs to be. But John backed down, and then Vanessa was like, okay, good. I thought so. It's kind of like she shut that shit down, in the wise words of a very evil person that I've become kind of accustomed to this week. Yeah. That's a whole thing I'm not about to get into. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. But kind of getting back to, we ended up, like, the whole situation was like, oh, Vanessa's dying and whatnot. I was like, well, shit. This is the perfect time to be dying when, Julius and then eventually the death squad was coming towards them, attacking the place and everything. But what ended up happening was, she actually was poisoned because basically there was a thing inside of her keeping her from completely healing. Because the interesting thing was when the doc cut her open, her leg, like, around the kind of bite mark was healing. It kept healing, so basically she ended up having John help her. Because first John kind of kept her her heart, like, kind of helping keep her alive when basically her heart stopped. Which that's kind of an interesting thing, like seeing John help her, just because John has such a problem with her at the beginning, and eventually he ended up saying like, yeah, I helped her out and everything. It's like, they're like, oh, thank you, because Susan was thinking, it was like, oh, thank you, because I heard from Doc that if it wasn't for you, Vanessa wouldn't be here. But he's like, oh, I did it. I would do it for almost anyone in here. I'm sure Axel would be one of the people he wouldn't do it for, but nevertheless. He's like, that's the thing. He's the asshole, which, we kind of see a little bit this episode because of the whole, like, Flesh situation, but, not pulling the trigger kind of shows, he's changing. The fact is that what am I trying to say? Like, it seems like he's turning on that new leaf. I don't know whether that's because he believes who Vanessa is. It's like, well, I've seen what she can do. She's kind of our best chance of surviving, so let's keep her alive. Or is it because it's like, knowing that she can cure vampires, so it's like, oh, she's a good person to have around in that regard. Or is it just because of the whole situation and what he did bringing John's wife here back, from outside or whatever. So maybe he owes her some debt in that regard. So maybe that's one reason why he helped out. But, ended up pulling out the fang, and now Vanessa's good again. I mean, she should be. This whole attack, though, kind of shows, and multiple things about the whole attack thing. For one, you had Axel on multiple occasions saying, hey, Doc, don't worry. I'll make sure we get out of this. And then the Doc was kind of giving him the cold shoulder, like, oh, I got to do something. I was like, because it seems like, because, kind of got brought up like the second episode that the Doc was kind of like, hey, I kind of have a thing, bringing up the fact is that Axel might have a thing for the Doc, and it seems like he definitely cares about her, but he kept bringing up, he's like, I'll protect you. Essentially bringing up, it's like, oh yeah, you helped out that guy, what was his name, Schmidt or Schmitty, or whatever the case may be. It's like, yeah, you got bit because you were trying to save him. I'm not going to forget that, the reason why you got turned was because you're trying to do a good thing. He's like, so I'll protect you, even if it costs me my life. And you see the look on the Doc's face, and it hurts. It breaks her heart, because to her, it means realizing the fact is that she's lying to him this entire time. He believes her to be a good person, when in actuality she's a terrible human being. And like I said, she's not terrible, but she hasn't admitted the truth because she's scared, because I guess she's afraid. I guess just saying it out loud would just hurt a lot, but even admitting it to Axel, because Axel, maybe in some way she's afraid that Axel won't protect her as hard as he's been protecting her because of that, because it's like, oh, you're not the good person I thought you were. You're actually a terrible person. You let Schmitty die. You actually, she could have easily left the door open. It's kind of interesting because you would have thought out of anyone, she's the most compassionate person. But I guess in some shape or form, that whole situation kind of showed you who she was on the inside. But at the same time, it's like, you can't fault her for it. She was scared. But I really wish that she would have taken the time to make sure he got in. It's just, you were actually trying to keep the door closed. It's like there was enough time for you to get him in there and then close the door. He could have, put his gun outside the door and gave you covering fire or something, but that wasn't good enough for her. So she's holding on to that. Plus, there's a whole situation of the fact is that Doc's a little pessimistic, because she's kind of like, because Axel's like, yo, we can take, essentially Doc was saying like we can take Vanessa's blood and we can re-engineer it into making a weapon, to kind of get rid of all vampires. But then, Axel's like, oh, that's a good thing. But Doc's like, would we really want to go back to that world? Because who's to say things will be any different? Who's to say we won't make the same mistake again? Which Axel's like, so you're saying this world is better? She's like, yeah, kind of maybe this is our punishment. This is kind of what we have to live through. Like, it's just we have to accept this as our 100% reality that there's no going back. But Axel's not set on that. I'm not really set on that. It's like, maybe more so than anything, the reason why the Doc is like that is because, like, for her, maybe she believes, the world doesn't necessarily deserve a second chance. In particular, maybe she feels like kind of tying in with the whole thing I was just talking about before. Maybe she doesn't believe she deserves a second chance. So makes you wonder, would she actually prefer being a vampire? Because it's like, at least she didn't have to think about all this, like what she did, the circumstances in which she became a vampire. Because she even remember, like, she told, like, Axel was like, you said, like, if one of us got turned, we'd take down the other one, but she changed her mind. And it's just kind of like, that side of her was like, she kind of would go as far as self-preservation is a lot important to her, which it is for everyone. But going to Axel about the whole situation, it's like, it's very interesting when you see him, Axel's usually calm, cool, and collected, has the entire plan, but then he kind of starts freaking out when everyone's kind of asking him all those questions, like, oh, we have to abandon the hospital, but he's like, yo, this place is fortified, which is understandable why he won't want to leave the place. It's like, this place has kept him in check. It's protected him, kept him alive for 3 years, and it's like abandoning one of the very few safe havens left. It's it's kind of hard to let go. Plus, it's been his home for so long, and it's just he doesn't want to let it go because it's like he hasn't had to necessarily 100% deal with the day-to-day of the outside world because he had the safety of that. I mean, it's also because of being a soldier. It's like being cornered. I mean, he was having this flip out moment. Like I said, he's usually calm and collected, and now you kind of see him falling apart. He's talking to himself. Nicole happens to overhear the conversation. She starts kind of talking like, yo, Axel's crazy. We need to give Vanessa up. And it's like, once again, who's to say things would be better if you gave Vanessa up? Vanessa's literally your only weapon against him. I mean, even John's agreeing. He's like, well, really? I mean, kind of, one a bit of his asshole moments of the episode, but it's like, yeah, Vanessa will actually survive this. We won't. But then, like I said, Axel brings up, like, who's to say that they won't come and kill us anyway? Because it's like, oh, they're going to be like, oh, okay, thank you for doing what we want to, hand over the woman. And it's like, chomp, they'll kill you. It's like, going down with a fight, it's like, dying that way is better than what they'll do if they come in there. It's like, you're screwed either way. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I feel like you're even more damned if you do. So don't hand her over because she's the key to everything. Because even was like, hey, we can take her blood and kind of make it into like a weapon to kind of disperse her blood around and kind of make them into humans. You get John's perspective on that, where he's kind of like, hey, they're human again, making them easier to kill. And then Flesh is like, wait, why would we kill them? Don't really get a response, but I guess, with the whole Flesh situation kind of tying into it. I mean, this is before he kind of, it's going to be interesting to see, like, after the whole thing with Vanessa at the end, like, whether this means he'll be completely okay with Flesh or not. He doesn't really treat Susan that way, but that's because he doesn't really know Susan. I guess it's a little different to him, I guess, because, like, he had a personal incident with Flesh because Flesh broke into her and everything, so I guess that makes it a little bit different. But, John's mind is like, once a vampire, always a vampire. It's like, it doesn't, even if you're human again, it doesn't change what you did. You did a very monstrous thing, and kind of feels like that will always be a part of you, which is kind of begs the question, like, between him and Doc, is like, even Susan, like, is that still inside of her or not? Which I, like I brought up last episode, her drinking, like, tasting that blood and everything, makes it seem like it is, so. Side note, it was very interesting because also in this episode we found out that basically Dimitri doesn't completely get rid of people, because it seems like, well, when they become human and everything, because apparently the guy that got turned human because he he successfully killed Vanessa, he was the one leading the group of the Death Squad that ended up coming after him. So obviously, it's because more often than not, it seems like once they turn human, they're kind of disposable. So it's kind of interesting to see that he actually keeps someone around. Like, it seemed like it's kind of the one leading the group, but it does seem like it does have its purposes. I mean, because obviously he was able to get past the UV lights and help them. I guess what really matters is whether they're still committed to the cause. I mean, I guess in some regards, it's like they probably keep some people. I mean, I'm sure there's very few people that she's changed human, because that's only become a recent thing. But decided to keep him because it's like, well, we can use you because it's like, oh, you're still loyal to the cause and everything. Is kind of what I was trying to say before. So, I mean, just interesting development in that regard. This episode also saw the end of Nicole, which is super sad. I mean, part of me is like, yeah, it was kind of idiotic of you to go off on your own like that. But granted, it's like she'd rather go off on her own than trust Axel. I said Alex. I guess all the letters are there, just rearranged it in my head for whatever. But she rather, because she didn't trust Axel, which she should have. But it's like, especially when you see like, when you're storming off and everything, when you realize that you're by yourself, it's like at that moment, it's like, I'll be like, oh, no one else is coming with me. I'm gonna go back and help them out. Then I've changed my mind, but sadly, it didn't work out that way. She got cornered, and rather than having to deal with them, she just shot herself. Which her death means one thing: she's not the killer. I mean, you could argue like, it's like there's no way she's the killer after killing herself like that. So it's like kind of leaves the rest of the group open to possibly being the killer. I really hope that we don't end up finding out that it actually is Axel. That this whole thing right here, him talking to himself, wasn't him just losing it in regards of just like the current situation. That basically he's lost it this entire time, and then just out of just something happened, he snapped. So that basically that was kind of a hint to show you is like, actually Axel is a killer. Or maybe that's kind of the thing to kind of make you think Axel's a killer. Maybe that's what's eventually going to lead them to possibly think Axel is the killer. Maybe some evidence is going to point that way or something. Everyone gets suspicious like, oh, it's Axel. And then it turns out it's actually not Axel. The whole thing's a setup. My money's still on Sam, dude. I don't, out of anybody, I kind of don't trust Sam the most now. Like I said, I didn't trust Nicole, but now she's kind of off the suspect list, so it still leaves her. I mean, it still leaves not Doc, Sam, and I taken John off the board, taking Muhammad off the board, obviously. So it leaves Axel, even though I'm like, I hope it doesn't go that route, but it totally could. Doc, Sam, and Flesh, which I don't think it's Flesh, but once again, you don't know. But the main two suspicious people is Doc and Sam, but specifically Sam. He's kind of my top suspect. It kind of has been for a little while now. Because that whole situation with the other group, talking about the fact is that they didn't want to kill Axel and them, that was all based on what Sam said. So, like, I don't know whether that was his plan of kind of getting rid of them by lying and saying, like, he read their lips saying, okay, that they're trying to kill us, or whether, like I said, that was payback for what they did with Muhammad. It could have been either or. We did have them basically blowing up the hospital at the end of the episodes, and they get inside what did he call the vehicle? Is it Wendy? Is that what he called it? Because he had Vanessa thinking that if the time came for it, he'd shoot her, basically killing her. He's like, I'll take you out. And then they get to the bottom and see kind of that souped up EMS, and she's like, you said you'd take me out. He's like, see, I told you I would. So kind of see them leave as they blow up the hospital. So they're kind of on the move now. Unfortunately for Muhammad, because he went through the whole trouble of putting up flares and everything. Part of me was thinking, like, I was trying to think, I was like, oh, maybe he's doing that to kind of lead the death squad to that direction, or more so than anything, it was kind of give them a warning that the death squad was there, because he's the one that kept putting up the flares. There's also all that military fire, so because Axel is kind of like, oh, that's definitely military training, like something like military weaponry that's going off and everything. So maybe that was Muhammad, because he did find a whole, like, that suitcase and everything, so maybe it wasn't just flares. My TV's a little dark, so there's certain scenes in this episode I gotta fix it, because it's been like a problem in a lot of stuff I watch. It's been a problem for like the past year or two. Like, I have to, because my remote's messed up, so I'm gonna have to do a lot of it by hand. I gotta change like the lighting settings on my TV, because like when I'm watching this show, I miss a lot of it because it's super dark on my TV. It's not really a dark show, but I'm sure it's also because my TV's super dark that kind of screws that up some. I know it's not important at all, but just adding it in case you were curious. So I didn't really see what he got, so I'm pretty sure it was probably some weaponry and stuff like that. So that could have been him firing, it could have been someone else. The whole resistance thing, that's kind of what Nicole threw out there as a possibility. So, but anyway, that's really all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.